Is Facebook also say we're live now.
Yep. Hello there, my name is Dan Skip Allen, and this is Bleacher Features. This is my summer series where myself and a friend, a guest, whoever, discuss a sports film. And I did a series last year, and I'm doing a series this year. We're going to try to do a few more episodes this summer than we did last summer. Did 4 episodes last summer. Hopefully we'll go to 8 or 10 this year. I am so pleased. I can't say how much I've been trying to get this man to discuss this particular sports film for a little while now. He's a very busy man. He's hard to nail down his schedule. He's got all kinds of things going on. Plus, he's very friendly, so he doesn't turn a whole lot of things down. Thank God he didn't turn me down this time. Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, welcome to Bleacher Features.
Well, Mr. Allen, it's a great pleasure to be here with you. You know, and when you asked me about this movie and to talk about this movie, I was like, hell yeah, I'll talk about this movie. Nobody talks about this movie anymore. I mean, I know it came out in 1979, but I'm a huge fan of this film, and it was one of the very first movies I ever videotaped off cable. You know, I had the R-rated version of it, and I watched it a lot. And I'm not even a big sports fan. I mean, I came from Seattle, and the Seahawks were an expansion team in '76, so we didn't have a big tradition of the NFL when I was growing up as a kid in Seattle. I mean, it started then, but I never played football in junior high or high school. But I love movies about sports. I love movies about the game of whatever game you're playing, and I love the daily lives, like what do people do when they're off hours, and I love the philosophy of sports, the business of sports. And this was the first movie that I remember seeing that really delved into all of those things. And also it's really a movie about friendship, and I love this film, and nobody remembers it. No one ever talks about it. You don't see it's ever written about, and it's almost sort of, I guess it's been lost to time.
Yeah, well, I'm right with you. You and Richard Roper are the only 2 people I've ever heard talk about this movie. He made a list of his top football movies of all time, and North Dallas 40 was number 1 on his list. And I was like, I got to watch North Dallas 40. And then, you know, as a fan of your show for the longest time, watching you, and every once in a while, I'd hear you talk about North Dallas 40. You mention it, and I was like, I'm glad there's fans of this movie out there. What people don't realize is it is such a realistic portrayal of football, even though it's about a fictional football team.
Right.
And that's the thing about this movie that is so good. And it's just such an authentic portrayal about people involved in the game of football. And that's why I love it so much. And when I heard you talking about it, I was like, I got to get Robert Meyer Burnett to talk about North Dallas 40 with me on Bleacher Features, because I know he would really bring a passion to it. So it took me a while to get you on here.
Well, you know, it's great. It's great to be here, and it's going to be fun to talk about this movie. And I see this movie as, for people who might want to know what it is. If you've ever watched Oliver Stone's Any Given Sunday is kind of this movie on steroids, really. And I love Any Given Sunday too, but Any Given Sunday is more epic than this. I mean, this film was made in 1979. It was directed by Ted Kotcheff, who later went on to direct First Blood with Sylvester Stallone a couple years later. And it's a look at the North Dallas Bulls, right? The North Dallas Bulls, which is
the North Dallas Bulls, basically the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and it's based on a novel by a former player. And I just really like this film, and it really deals with the travails of an aging football player played by Nick Nolte, whose best friend is the quarterback of the team, played by Mac Davis in his first screen role. And it really delves into their lives both on and off the playing field, and what does it mean, and the fact that they party really hard with the rest of the players off, and it really
all that.
Yeah, it's just a great. I think it's a great look at the overall. What does it mean to be in the culture of professional sports?
Yeah,
and I love it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, so yeah, like you said, Ted Kotcheff is the director. It's basically the story of the North Dallas Bulls, which is, by all intents and purposes, the Dallas Cowboys. It's a week in the life of a professional football team. Even though the football team is a fictionalized football team, it's basically a week in the life of this professional team. And I'm just calling them the Dallas Cowboys, even though it's the Dallas Bulls in the movie. It's, to me, that's what I gathered. I don't know what team it was or
no, it was because Peter Gent, who wrote the book, he was a Cowboys wide receiver in the late 1960s. Okay. So it really is. It's totally about the Dallas Cowboys.
All right. So the cast, like you said, Nick Nolte as Phil Elliott, Mac Davis, Seth Maxwell, John Matuszek, O.W. Shattuck, Dale Haddon, Charlotte Calder, Joe Svensson is I got damn autocorrect. Joe Bob Pretty, Charles Durning, Coach Johnson, Steve Forrest, Conrad Hunter, G.D. Spradlin as B.A. Struthers, Savannah Smith Boucher as Joanne Rodney, Alan Autry as Andy Balford, Dabney Coleman as Emmett Hunter, and Tommy Raymond as Delma Hudson. Besides obviously Nick Nolte and Mac.
And Charles, did you say Charles Durning, who plays the coach of the team, who I love?
He's the assistant coach of the team.
Assistant coach.
Durning. Yeah. And he obviously, you know him from the famous role in Dog Day Afternoon, where he's the police chief. And he's great opposite Al Pacino and John Cazale in Dog Day Afternoon. I mean, great. If you have people out there watching, you haven't seen Dog Day Afternoon, go see that movie. So that's the cast. You got any thoughts on the cast besides the two main guys? Anything?
Well, I mean, it's all character actors of the 70s, but like I love G.D. Spradlin. He's been in so many different. He was in Apocalypse Now. You know, he always shows up as either an evil politician or a coach or a business guy or officer. Steve Forrest, who was in SWAT. He played Hondo in SWAT, and of course the great Dabney Coleman. Charles Durning later went on to be the man who fell in love with Dustin Hoffman in Tootsie. You know?
Oh, I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah. And it's just, and then there's a lot of real NFL players sprinkled into the cast. And I love, and Bo Svensson, he's great. And I just think it's just a great cast of 70s He-Men.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, these are 70s guys. You could tell what movie. This is a cast of 70s guys, because you don't see a lot of these guys after this, but you see some of them, like you said, sprinkle around here and there. All right, so let's get into it. Starting off here, Phil Elliott, hungover, sleeping, back hurts, takes pills with open beer on the counter, takes a bath while smoking a joint. And then we got a montage of hits and plays from previous game he played. This really gets you into the movie and gets you into the Phil Elliott character right off the bat.
And you hear that there's a great piece of kind of mournful music, you know, as he's sitting there. So what is he, like in his bathtub or, you know, feeling? Yeah, and you really get that. It really shows, like, you never. One of the things that struck me about this movie when I first saw it is you never feel. What's it like the next day when you've played a full football game and you've really got beat up? Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that, in my mind, it really struck me. I mean, there had been other football movies that had come out that I probably hadn't seen, like the original Semi-Tough with Burt Reynolds, which I hadn't probably seen yet, that dealt with those kinds of things. But you really get a sense right off the bat that football's brutal. Oh, and it's brutal to play, and it's brutal to be out there, and there's how much pressure there is, and it is not the best way to spend your days.
No, it isn't. Okay, so then we have friends break into house, take him hunting. Phil gets advice from Seth about life in the game. There's going to be some scenes in this movie where we get Seth and Phil talking about life, and then Phil will talk about somebody else. He'll get life lessons from somebody else. So there's going to be some scenes in the movie that we get a lot of that. These guys are the players. They go hunting on their days off. So that, you know, that's good team bonding, player bonding there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. I mean, there's a lot of the idea that I guess one of the things that I've always loved about sports movies is that even if I don't love sports or know much about it particularly, I love the idea that all sports movies kind of have this mythic structure because they're men that are whether you're playing on the gridiron or whatever, this idea of winning and losing, and you're going to battle, and there's the psychological toll and there's the physical toll and what it all means and how do men bond together and how you have to rely on each other in order to win and the friendships that develop. So it has immediately these mythical elements that are part of the story. And that's what I've always liked. There's like a classical structure built into these stories. So you're immediately interested. You find yourself immediately sort of you're interested in what these men's lives are like, and you like them. You want them to succeed. They're good guys, and yet that they're in their own lives. They're thinking, especially Nick Nolte's getting on in years in the movie, and should he keep doing this? And it's like Nick's like that perfect hang dog. I don't know if I should do it. Do I have another year in me? Do I have another game in me? And you're really with them. And I found when I first saw this movie, I had to have been 13 years old, and I felt like I was seeing a glimpse into a world, an adult world, but it wasn't crime. It was football, so it's sort of in a way uplifting, but it's still hardcore. And as a kid, it really left an impression on me, this movie.
Yeah. I agree. All right, so the guys go to a party after they come back from hunting. So there's two girls, and they're not paying attention to Phil. The other one's staring at him. One's like not paying attention. One's staring at him at a party. Andy and another player fight over a girl. Phil meets Charlotte for the first time. And Joe Bob carrying girl over his head around the party. All right, so this is kind of, we're getting different kind of players' reactions. And then, of course, Phil gets involved because Joe Bob likes Charlotte, and and then once again, Phil gets advice from Seth about Charlotte and whatnot. Why is he getting involved with Joe Bob and whatever? Well, we find out why he gets involved with Joe Bob, because he actually likes Charlotte.
Right.
They have an actual intellectual conversation, even though it's for a very short amount of time.
Yeah, I it's, and again, there's that element. There is a romantic side to this movie, and you do see, so there, which I like. It really covers all the bases.
Yeah, of course, Seth is telling him about. They both had failed relationships in the past. Both Phil and Seth have. So Phil falls asleep on Charlotte's couch. Phil arrives for a meeting with B.A. Struthers. This is the coach after the game a couple days later, trying to talk to him about the game and talk to him about his what he should get. And then, of course, the owner comes up to him, and he wants to give him advice too. Conrad Hunter wants to give him some advice as well. And then, of course, B.A. Struthers wants to quote the Bible. Of course, all these guys, all these leaders, they always want to quote the Bible.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, all right, that's good. Thanks, appreciate it. So he's not happy. He thinks Phil's immature. B.A. Struthers, G.A. Spradlin, that's the character. G.A. Spradlin, I believe. G.D. Spradlin. He's not happy. He thinks Phil's immature. I mean, they're all immature at this point. They're NFL football players. I mean, they're all immature. I mean, give me a break, I don't know what he's trying to get out of Phil at that point in the movie, After the game, he played the game. Phil knows his abilities, and he knows he can catch the ball. You throw it to him, he's going to catch it.
Yeah.
So he's confident in his abilities. So I don't know what the coach is trying to do to him right then and there, but maybe we'll find out later on in the film. And then he said, "Hey, when you start me, I'll make you glad you did." So he's like, "Hey, start me. Don't have guys in front of me, and I'll be the guy that makes you happy after you put me in the game." That kind of thing. Backups always want to play. That's the nature of sports. You don't want to be the backup. You want to be the starter. All right. So, and then we go. And then, of course, the owner comes in, this is Emmett Hunter, Dabney Coleman. He threatens him. Oh, we got a new recruit, and we're gonna get this kid in the draft, and I got the contract right here, and all this kind of stuff. He's like he's going through all this stuff, and they don't really need to do this to the guy, you know. That's how I got it. I mean, why are you giving Phil a hard time? But they just feel like they need to give Phil a hard time for some reason. You know?
Well, but he's also kind of this he is kind of an anti-establishment guy, and you know, he's been around. He's not exactly the most disciplined person in the world. That's one of the things about these characters and I think they know that about him. You know, they want somebody they can mold, and Phil won't take any shit.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. All right, so it turns out that Phil is having some kind of a sexual relationship with the owner's daughter. Her name is Joanne, and I guess he goes off to her apartment and he has sex with her. And then, of course, Phil confides in Joanne about meeting and his future in football. Like, there's a lot of Phil confiding in people about things, you know, about life, about football, about his future and so forth. So there's a lot of that, which is good. I kind of like those character building moments with Phil and all these different people, including the owner's daughter. I think it's the owner's daughter, Joanne, and he's having an affair with her, I believe. So then, ignoring the fact that he's falling apart, we saw that at the beginning of the film. He's kind of like falling apart.
Right.
And as the film goes, you're going to see more of that. They share some chocolate pudding for breakfast. He's like, hey, I want eggs and bacon and toast. I got pudding. All right, let me have some of that pudding, which is kind of funny. He says, I'm having pudding for breakfast. Then, of course, Joanne says she wants to marry Emmett Hunter and asks if he'll still come by and see her. He says if he can, which basically says, this is over, buddy. We're not going to have any more kind of these kind of coming over my house and having sex and you staying at my house, because I'm going to marry Emmett Hunter, which is Dabney Coleman.
Right.
That's Dabney Coleman's character. Then we got, B.A. Struthers calls out players in video room study. Okay, this is kind of a funny scene in a way, because players, they always have video room study. You always have the video room study scenes, and the coach calling out these players, you know, and then he's like, oh, no one is better than the computer. Like, the video on the computer shows all the mistakes and it shows what you're doing wrong. And then this one guy who messes up, he makes a mistake and they cut him. He gets fired after the video room, which that's how fast it can happen. You know,
right.
Screw up.
Yeah, you've got no security, and now they're taking the human element out of it, and as if a computer, just because a computer's not out on the field, a computer can't make these split-second decisions when you're running around and you've got defenders or offensive players, and it was a great. I mean, they in a way, this movie has a lot of things we see in later movies, like Moneyball, the Brad Pitt movie Moneyball, where it talks about how using computer technology to decide how to build a team. And this was sort of the first instance of that, when you see technology coming in and replacing the human element, which is something that obviously is now a theme more so than ever. But back then, you think about the early 70s, it was being talked about even then. So they really, there's a lot of really interesting elements about the business of sports that I think are in the plot that really work well.
Yeah. All right, so they go to practice in the gym. Phil gets hurt his fingers in practice, and then later on, Phil gets tackled by Douglas, and he's out for a second. I mean, this is a gym floor. This guy tackles Phil on a gym floor. I mean, he's out cold. Phil's out cold for a second. I mean, because they told Douglas to tackle. It's like,
right.
Really? This is you're practicing, and this is a gym floor. I mean, that's ridiculous that he did that. So then he, of course, the guy wasn't already injured and not feeling good. He hurts his shoulder, takes a shot in the backside, which is a reoccurring thing we're going to see throughout the film. And then some of these characters have little side plot things, and one of them is Joe Bob. Joe Bob has a meeting about his restaurant. He's trying to start a restaurant, and then, of course, he ends up getting a fight with Phil over a comment that Phil made. Joe Bob is one of these guys that he just flares up and he'll go off on the drop of a second. And he's a big dude, Joe Bob is. So he could really hurt you if he gets his hands on you. So
yes.
But yeah, he just got a lot of anger built up in him, Joe Bob does. So that's that. Okay. Then this is a very interesting scene. We don't think much about this scene until later on in the film, really the end of the film. A guy breaks into Phil's apartment, threatens to shoot him before leaving. Now, we don't know what the heck this is until the end of the movie, but you're like, holy crap, this guy's breaking in and he's got a gun, so he's threatening them and stuff. I mean, of course, Phil don't know what the heck is going on, So then Phil breaks in the medicine cabinet on the team training room before taking ice bath. Seth tells story about Jesus and Judas playing football on the same team and the devil. I love that story from Seth about Jesus and Judas. I was like, wow, where did that come? What an interesting story that was. Never heard that. I've been a sports fan my whole life. I've watched every sports movie you can imagine.
Yeah.
And ESPN for 40 years. I never heard that story before.
And it's a great story too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, wow, what a great story comparing Jesus and Judas with football. I mean, I never would have thought that. Of course, the trainer comes in and he's mad with Seth and Phil about getting into the cabinet. Even the trainer's their friend, but he doesn't want to be put in a bad situation either. So he's kind of like in the middle of the management and the coaches and the players, because he likes the players, but he also knows some of the stuff the players are doing is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
So then we got a montage scene of a workout montage scene. Then this is another character on the team. It's this. He has his little bit of an arc in the film. The Christian quarterback didn't go home to his wife after the party. This guy's like a Bible thumper guy,
Yeah.
Doesn't know what to say. He lied to her and she believed him. I was like, dude, you're a football player. She knows you're not going to come home sometimes. She knows you're going to be out partying. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian Bible thumper or not. They know what football players do.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So that was kind of funny that he's like, I don't know what to do. Don't worry. Just go home and tell her something else. Tell her a lie. And he did, and she believed him. So once again, Phil and Seth having a heart-to-heart conversation in the sauna. Guys talking about life. These are the scenes that really make this movie great. I mean, these scenes with Seth and Phil are some of the best scenes in the movie, in my opinion, because they really do delve into a lot of great stuff. Phil's stretching and it hurts him real bad. Charlotte confronts him, but he still dreams of missed catch in a game. He had one missed catch in the game prior, and he keeps dreaming about the one missed catch he had. But Charlotte is seeing him stretch, and she realizes this guy's got some problems.
Yeah.
Because he's dreaming about the catch, but he's also stretching, and you could tell his body is shot.
Right. And that's another recurring theme in this film. I mean, the physicality of all that, and the painkillers and the drugs, and how these guys are pressured to push themselves further than they might normally do it. And and everything. And that's always sort of a recurring theme in football movies, is that people they're pushing themselves too far, and there is an inherent danger in it. And this movie does a really good job from the opening frames all the way through to what we're talking about now. How much the playing football just hurts. It just hurts.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And this film really captures the pain in this game. Okay, so there's a team meeting with B.A. Struthers, gives them the bad news about mistakes and what they need to improve on. Of course, this is a funny scene, but it's kind of a bad scene that they're making fun of Coach Johnson. But Coach Johnson reads a letter to the team, plus Phil. Players argue about the letter Coach Johnson is reading. Then afterwards, they ask for a copy of the letter, but they don't really want a copy of the letter.
Right.
They're just mocking Coach Johnson about the letter that he read, a motivational letter that he read. It's like, I've been around a lot of coaches, football and basketball and baseball. They want to find something to motivate the players, and they'll find motivation anywhere they can find it. And a lot of times it's quotes from previous coaches, things that people written that may have been published in books or whatever. So Coach Johnson read a Christian or an uplifting letter to the team, and they're over there making fun of him. Coach Johnson is Charles Durning, just so everybody knows watching. Okay, then, so a player named Delmar gets hurt in practice. Coach convinces them to play at full speed, and Joe Bob is going half speed. He gets upset. A fight breaks out, and Joe Bob and Monroe get into it. All right, so this is a series of, like, Delmar is the guy in front of Phil Elliott, and he gets hurt in practice, so Phil has to go in. This might lead to some good news for Phil about starting down the line. Then Coach Johnson isn't seeing the motivation that he wants to see in practice, so he convinces the defensive lineman to go full speed, while Joe Bob thinks he's just going half speed, and he gets leveled. And Joe Bob, once we know his temper, he has a temper. He goes after Monroe big time. He does after that, because he wasn't expecting Joe Bob to be going all out on those players. So then they find out Delma has a torn hamstring, which means Phil's probably going to start the game. At least that's what Phil's under the interpretation, that he's going to start the game. Okay, and this is where it is. BA calls Phil over after practice, asks him if he can count on him in Chicago. So basically, BA Struthers, the coach, is saying, hey, dude, we need you in Chicago.
Yeah.
We count on you. And he's, of course you can count on me. You can always count on me. I told you that before. You can count on me.
Right.
So, so Phil, nobody knows this, but Phil takes Charlotte to his little country house in the country that he's building. But he's not really in a hurry to get this house moving along, Robert.
No.
He's got 20 acres in the middle of Texas somewhere, or obviously adjacent to Dallas somewhere. And it's like, you're like, what? I'd be building this in a heartbeat if I was him. But no.
Yeah.
He's not building. He's not in a hurry to build.
I mean, it's a great place to have.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So then we get, I would definitely, if I'm an athlete and I have that, that'd be a perfect area to retire on. And then they have a nice little get together, a dinner meeting at the trailer. He has a little trailer on the property. They kind of have dinner and hang out outside the trailer and stuff like that. And this is something I really liked about this, is when he is with Charlotte, his mind is 1,000 miles away from football.
Yeah.
And of course, Charlotte lectures him about football and injuries. Another heart-to-heart, which Charlotte or Seth. Mostly it's Charlotte and Seth that he's having these conversations with. But we start to hear the same things over and over again, Robert. Is this game Are you really? Do you need to stay in this game? Do you need to? Is this game worth it for your life? They're basically kind of comparing his life, saying, hey, the injuries, the length of time you played, the things you have to do just to play every game, is it worth it? Which is kind of a broken record in a way, So then he gets upset with her, tells her to drop it, tells her he'll do something special for her, gets to the stadium early, gets taped up, and takes pill for hidden pain. When you're injured, when you're an injured player or a player, just you have to get to the stadium early. You do. You have to get your taped up, you get your stretching in. In his case, he takes a needle and he takes pills, which is, like we said, we've been talking about this all along. It's a process for him to get ready for the game. It is. Or practice or whatever.
Yeah, no, and again, it's it's shown, like, is it worth it? Like, you're giving up a real life, you're giving up your health, and for this game, is it worth it? Is the financial reward worth it? And the fact you can't really have a real life. I mean, it's constantly reiterated throughout this movie, and it's done really well too. You really relate to it. Even as somebody who doesn't play football, you totally get it. You understand what the stakes are, which I really like about the film.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just ruining your life. You're just making your life after football worse. You just don't know it, All right, so then we get a chant from OW and Joe Bob before the game, trying to pump themselves and the players up. Phil takes it. Well, I just said it. Phil takes a huge needle in his knee. Then this is the part that I didn't expect, because I've seen the movie multiple times, but rewatching it again, I forgot about this. Coach Johnson lectures Delma about pain and injury and what's important for the team. Oh, here we go, Robert. Now he's going. They basically told Phil that he's going to start, but then they're going to go to Delma and try to lecture him about, oh, you need to take one for the team, and you need to take your pills and your needles, and you need to get in there. It's like, wait a minute here. And so, and Delma said he doesn't like needles. Needles aren't good for him.
Right.
He knows it. He knows needles aren't good for him. And then you see all the players going through their pregame rituals, which is fun. Being in a locker room, being a coach in a basketball locker room, and a football locker room over the 20 years that I've been involved with sports coaching and stuff, it's kind of neat to see the players going through their own personal rituals.
Right.
I know it's not football, but I remember, I'm a huge Red Sox baseball fan. Wade Boggs would eat Kentucky Fried Chicken before every game. It was like every game he would have chicken and Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's like, damn it, man. And so all these players, they have their rituals. It's kind of funny watching them go through their rituals. Go ahead. Did you have something you want to say?
Well, I mean, no, I think absolutely. And again, even it's just another part, like, instead of praying, praying to God, these rituals center these players, and it's a fun thing. I mean, the authenticity here is what makes this movie. It feels real, and you feel like they're really pulling back the things we don't see. The curtain on this, and you really get a sense that this, what's being depicted here again, is real. That you're watching something that's genuine. That it's based on research, and of course, a real player wrote the book that the movie's based on. And the filmmakers, they really make you believe. They include all this detail, and it feels just really authentic, which I love.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like the one player, the guy's taping his ankle or knee up, and he's no, you're gonna take the right knee up, not the left. No, you got to do that one first. It's like,
yeah,
because it's superstitious and stuff. So it's kind of funny. So then we get, of course, the players are nervous about the game. Of course, we know the players are going to be nervous about the game. Hunter and Conrad, and the Hunter brothers, Conrad and Emmett, give pregame pep talk to the team, and then BA breaks bad news to Phil about starting, and Delma Delma starts instead, which Phil, of course, is pretty upset. I mean, when you started seeing Coach Johnson pepping him up about taking the needle and stuff, you're like, oh boy,
Yeah,
it's going to go good for Phil. He's not going to like this.
No. And yeah, it's these moments in another movie. Like if you're watching some action movie, it would be like, this would be the moment where he's facing down enemy fire or something, but it's not. I mean, it's just the idea of whether you're going to take a needle, it's not just the needle, it's the drugs. What is it doing? What is it doing to your insides?
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah. So we're into the game now. We're getting into the game. North Dallas losing. 2 minutes left in the game. Yeah, the whole game has gone by. North Dallas Bulls are losing. There's 2 minutes left in the game. Player drops a ball. First down for Bulls. OW and Joe Bob hurt. Weeks. Okay, there's a defensive lineman on Chicago that's absolutely killing OW and Joe Bob this entire game. This guy's like an absolute beast. These guys it's like a Randy Lawrence Taylor type of guy. Like, you cannot stop this guy. Lawrence Taylor, what's his name for the Eagles? Dang it. Oh, God, he played for the Eagles and the Packers. Reggie White, that type of guy. And he's absolutely killing OW and Joe Bob here. And it's like everybody's upset. These guys can't stop this guy because the quarterback, which is Seth, he can't do anything because this guy's in his backfield the whole day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So penalty, and Delma, there's a penalty on the play, and then Delma is hurt. He pulls his hamstring. So we now learn in the game, watching Delma, that he should have not been playing in the game. Why did they put this guy in the game? Convince him to take that needle and those drugs, because now the recovery process is going to be that much longer because he just messed his hamstring up again in the middle of the game, or at crunch time towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
Which is good for Phil, not good for the team, but good for Phil because Phil now gets to play. So Phil almost makes the game-tying catch, but oh man, this is sports films that don't end in a happy moment. Like, oh, the team won on a basket, or they won with the game-winning touchdown, or they won with a home run. Here's a sports film that doesn't have a happy moment. It has a depressing moment at the end of the quote-unquote main game, which is basically just a regular season game for the team.
Right, but Phil makes the catch, but it's the extra point at the end.
Yep, I had it right here.
And it's so. But what I love about that is, like, Phil does what he's supposed to do, and you think it's a moment of triumph. You think that and then all the work that they did in this game comes down to someone else. It's not them. They're not the stars of the. I mean, they are, but the fates intervene, and even though they did what they're supposed to do, at the end, it's not to be.
How many times have we watched a football game and the kicker missed the field goal? Or the
it
happens all the time.
And it happens all the time, and it's just again, it becomes mythic. The movie becomes mythic because it's not like, oh, we're going to show the heroes winning by doing what they do. Only in sports can the heroes do everything they need to do. But that when you're playing on a team, other teammates, if they can't do what they're supposed to do, and it's not even the kicker missing, it's the guy getting the snap and he bobbles the ball.
And who is it? It's our Christian quarterback who's got his mind on something else. That's
not right.
On the task at hand. And what I love about this film, and we're going to get into that stuff later, but I got some more scenes I want to talk about, is we see these through lines get to the end of the film. And each one of these characters kind of get to their end point in the film. Delma, hamstring. Now the Christian quarterback blowing the extra point. These characters' arcs come to an end at various points in this film, and they all make sense in the end. It's not like this isn't a contrived film, and it's not convoluted. Every one of these stories all have a through line, and they all make sense, and they all have a very believable ending to each one of their stories. But we have some more to talk about here. So he misses the extra point. The team ends up losing the game 14-13. OW lectures Coach Johnson about the game and everything else. He says it's a business to him, not a game. Now here's OW, who is over there chanting and they're having a good time. He's over there giving this lecture to Coach Johnson about it's a business to you. It's not about the game and all this stuff. It's like, what are you talking about, OW? You know, you're out there having a good old time. You're partying, having a great time, and having, there was nothing that showed me that OW was about the game and not about the business. So they didn't really go a whole lot into, but didn't he, wasn't that guy actually an NFL player? If I'm mistaken, Shadiak, or what was his name? He resembles a player to me, a guy that may have played the game. His name is John Matuzak.
Yeah, Matuzak, he's a player.
Yeah, I thought he was. So I guess they just wanted to give John Matuzak a scene in the movie that he could remember, going forward. But I don't know. I didn't think that was believable for his character at that point. But everybody else's character was pretty good, if you ask me.
Yeah, he was with the Raiders. He was with the Raiders. He was the #1 draft pick in 1973, a first overall draft pick, and he played the Raiders until he retired after winning his second Super Bowl in 1981.
Yeah, I thought I recognized him.
Yeah, but he seems, they called him the Twos. That was his nickname. And what's so great is he was not an actor, but with that big speech, I mean, he's great. And you could see that a lot of it came from his own heart. And that's, I thought that was really, really good.
Now, he does the speech is a good speech, but leading up to that, you really don't believe what he's saying to me. That's just me. I don't know. That's a critic. I guess it's the film critic in me, but whatever. So we get that after that. Then the Christian QB is crying about losing losing the game. Of course, we're going to go to him crying. That makes sense that he's over in the corner crying.
Right.
Phil visits injured Delma about the game, says you're going to be back, which is good. Phil, that's the type of guy Phil is. He's going to go to Delma and say, "Hey, man, don't worry about it. You're going to heal up. You're going to come back. You're going to be fine." That's who Phil is as a person. Then he goes to visit Charlotte. He tells her about the game, and she doesn't like what he's saying. He says he cares about her. We know he cares about her because if you look at the stuff involving football, this is the only thing that he cares about other than football in the whole world. Because everything he's willing to do for the game of football, this is the only thing he has shown in this entire movie he cares about other than football. So we know he cares about Charlotte. And that's what's kind of like in his brain is like, what do I do? What am I going to do? He tells her about that he's got a meeting with Conrad and BA about where the previous, okay. So he has a meeting. He gets called into a meeting. He does with Conrad and Struthers and everybody. Then they ask him about what he was doing the previous Tuesday night. And then it turns out to be the robber that was robbing his apartment was actually a private detective. And you're like, oh my God, how dare they do this to this guy?
Yeah.
How dare they? He'd been surveilling him for a week, the entire week of the movie. He's been surveilling him. And so, of course, I know, and because we're watching the movie, they found out about him and Joanna is what happened. Emmett Hunter, Dabney Coleman found out about him and Joanna. So they're trying to find a way to basically sabotage his career because of what happened with Emmett's, we now know is going to fiance, you know?
Right.
So this whole thing is all embroiled here. So Emmett and Phil have it out. And Phil pleads with BA about what he's given back to the team. Of course, Struthers has been in on this whole thing the whole time. So all the stuff you hear from Struthers' mouth is a bunch of baloney the whole film, because he's been in on it. And then this is a great, great quote in the movie. We're the jock straps and the equipment, and the owners are the team, not the players and coaches. He's basically saying they're just being used by the owners and the coaches, that they're just the jock straps and the equipment, and they're just being used.
Yeah, and that again, it's the dehumanization of the whole process. All the men are replaceable. All that hard work, all the pain that we go through is ultimately not appreciated, you know, and it's not something that it's dehumanizing, and they're not wrong.
Yeah. So after this meeting, needless to say, Phil is suspended without pay for violating team and league rules. Then quits the team, and Seth outside waiting for him. Seth is waiting for Phil after meeting. Gives Seth a bottle of painkillers. They wish each other luck going forward. This tells you how wise Seth was. Seth knew all this was going on the entire time because he was involved with it.
Right.
They were basically making sure he didn't say anything about what was going on.
Yep.
And after it was all done, he was outside waiting for him. But that tells you what kind of a friend he was. And then also the reverse, Phil never mentioned Seth in anything that he said in that meeting.
Right.
So that tells you how close of a bond these two have with one another. Phil knew that Seth had to be there. He was the quarterback. He was going to be there no matter what. So no sense throwing him under the bus. And then, of course, Seth, he couldn't say anything because he was the quarterback of the team and he was part of the team. And they wanted Phil out, and he knew he couldn't do anything about it. So what good was it for him to say anything to Phil about it? But he was waiting for him afterwards. That tells me he did care about him, and he wanted to console him after the fact.
Yeah, I mean their friendship was real, but you have to deal with also the reality of the business and where we're going to go and what is your future going to be and who matters to whom and all of that. And it's nothing is ever black and white or cut and dried in this movie. Everything is ambiguous. I mean, life is gray, and that's what I really like about this film.
Yeah. So what I always like to do, Robert, is first of all, why does this movie stand up still 40 years after it came out? And then also, what is it about this film that means so much to you that you would come on here and discuss it with me? Those are the two questions I always try to leave people with at the end.
Why? Well, look, I think one of the things that what bums me out is I have this theory that pop culture or movies, every 20 years, once a movie's 20 years old, it starts to sort of fall away into obscurity because there's so much content and there's so much stuff to watch that movies get forgotten. They're sort of generational. And this is a film that, one, it did well. I mean, it was actually a pretty successful movie when it came out because the subject matter, obviously, it deals with football, the great American sport. And I wish more people knew about this film, and I think this movie still works. And for me, when I was younger, when I was a kid, it was really influential to me because it had a lot to say about the adult world, you know, about how do you navigate. You might love your profession, but there's also corporations and owners, and the message of this film has not changed, even though this movie is now 41 years old. And again, when you go and you watch Oliver Stone's Any Given Sunday is very similar. It covers the same kind of ground. Now it's bigger and brasher and bolder, and the filmmaking is a lot more Like this movie's, the filmmaking is not flashy. It's very matter of fact. It's very 70s. It's very documentary. You Are There style. Whereas if you watch Any Given Sunday, there's all kinds of cinematic tricks, and it's very sexy to watch, and it's really well lit and everything. But it would make a great double bill with Any Given Sunday, because you see how filmmaking, the art of filmmaking, has changed. And I think this is a film that anybody who's a film lover would enjoy and get something out of. I mean, I still think even 41 years later, it's just as relevant today as it was then, which is why I wanted to come and talk to you about it. By the way, what was the first question? Like what you said?
What is it? How does it? Why does it have so much relevance? Why does it? You answered the stand-up one, right? Why does it still stand up 41?
Yeah, I mean, I did right. I know there's two parts to the question. I forgot.
Yeah, the other one was what does it mean to you? What does this feel?
Yeah. To me, when I saw it when I was a kid, it was sort of, it peeled back part of, normally I was watching science fiction movies or horror movies or movies that were not real, fantasy films. And I love fantasy films. I love science fiction movies. This is a movie that, to me, when I first saw it, it really resonated, because I thought as a kid I was learning something about the adult world. And I got fascinated. I mean, when I was like 12 and 13, 14, that's when I really started really getting into watching movies and studying movies and what did they all mean. And this, I felt like I was learning something about the world that I didn't know about yet. Being a kid, you weren't really concerned, like the business of football, especially me being just a casual fan. This was a movie that taught me about a world that I was going to maybe move into someday. Not I don't mean moving into the football world, but moving into the world of finance and business and having to work in these kinds of realms. And I felt I was learning something I wasn't yet supposed to know, and I'm like, this is how adults work. And I thought there was something to learn from here. And I still feel the way. I went back and watched the movie again, and I own it. And I hadn't watched it in a long time, and it really holds up. And the performances are great. And Mac Davis and Nick Nolte as the leads in this movie are so good together. And it was you think it's Mac Davis's, he was a country star, and it was his first movie. And it's amazing to watch. It's an incredible performance.
He's great in it. I mean, the lead actor always needs a buddy, a best friend. I mean, it doesn't, whether it's a sports movie or just whatever. And he really is that, Tim. Yeah, he's not the romantic interest, but obviously, the romantic interest is good too, because she brings a lot to the. What I think about this movie is, sports movies kind of can be. Like you said, Any Given Set can be boisterous and loud and out there and colorful, or have these great moments at the end or whatever. This movie is grounded in reality. And as someone who's coached basketball and coached football for the last 20 years, I've been involved with high school football and high school basketball for the last 20 years. You see the reality of sports and the cost that it takes on the human body and a person's relationships and so forth. And then, like you said, the business aspect, we all have bosses, and sometimes we're not going to get along with our bosses.
Right.
And our bosses, just for whatever reason, you could work as hard as you want to work. Your boss just doesn't like you. And trust me, I've been there. I could tell you multiple stories of my bosses that did not like me for whatever reason, no matter how hard I worked or how much I cared. They don't care the fact that you work, and you just need to do things the way they want them done. And if you're doing things aren't different than the way they want them done, guess what? They're going to find a way to try to get rid of you. In this case, they had this detective come follow him, and they, the scene where he was in the hot tub with Seth, the private eye says to him, "Oh, you were in a hot tub with another man." He said, "Did you know which other man that was? Did you recognize that other man?" And even though he never said it, we know what other man that was.
Right. Yep.
And you're like, you're going to give him a hard time about that? We know what it's about. It's about him sleeping with Emmett Hunter's fiance.
Right.
Man, that's what it's about. But they didn't want to make it about what it's actually about. Bosses are really good about that.
Yep.
They won't make it what it's actually about. They want to make it about something else. Like, you didn't do this right, or you didn't listen to whatever. You know, it's so perfect the way the movie ended, because you're like, wow, we can all relate to this. Even though it's about sports and football, I've been there. I'm sure you've been there. You're like, I didn't deserve to be fired. I didn't deserve to be treated this way by my bosses or whatever. You work a lot on your own. You're in the film industry, but you do a lot of work, but you still have a boss. You have to answer to somebody. But
yeah, there's always somebody to answer to.
Yeah.
Always somebody.
So for a movie that's 41 years old, it really captures the world of football. It captures reality. It captures about the injuries and the body, and it also captures working and the workplace and whatnot. And that's why it stands up to me as one of the best sports movies I have ever seen. And when I make lists and people always ask me, oh, what's your favorite football movies, or this or that, I always have North Dallas 40 in my top 10 ever since I saw it.
Yeah, me too. I'm just surprised again how few people know this movie. Like, when you wanted to talk about this, I'm like, I'd love to talk about this movie because I think more people need to see it.
Yeah.
But, it's hard in this day and age. There's so much content coming out. It's hard to get people to look back into the past, which it bums me out because there's such a rich cinematic legacy. And this is definitely one of them. This is a gem. And this really marks the end of a certain kind of this. The filmmaking of American films of the 70s were very sort of different. And then they gave way to the flashy 80s. Yeah. MTV came into play, and the way movies started to be edited like music videos, and things changed in the way cinematography looked. And this is part of an era that is never going to come around again.
No, so. And that's why I always tell people when they ask, what's your favorite decade? I said the 70s, hands down, is my favorite decade. Yeah, did I grow up in the 70s? I wasn't really conscious about growing up, and I was born in 74. 1980 is when I really got into my consciousness and movies became a thing. Seeing Raging Bull, seeing The Empire Strikes Back, seeing those films as a 6-year-old. That's what. And then, of course, my station in Boston had so many classics of every kind of genre you can imagine. Absorbing them at 6, 7, 8, 9. Those years were great years for me, absorbing it. That's why I love listening to your podcasts and your shows, and listening to you talk about going to the movie theaters in Seattle and all that stuff. That stuff is just like you're preaching to the choir. I was like, yeah, that's me, man. That's how I was. We were really poor, but I had a TV station, and I could just watch that TV station. I got 2 things out of it, Robert. I got movies and I got sports off of that station. TV 38 in Boston, and it was whatever movies, whatever genres they were doing that day, and then the hockey game, and then the basketball or the baseball game would be on. And that's for years. It was like that for me as a kid.
I mean, it was that's the best way to grow up.
Yeah, I mean, so these kids today, people today, they just don't realize what they're missing and the types of things that we grew up with. Yeah, you're a little bit older than me, and Scott Mantz, another good buddy of mine, is a little older, but we kind of have a similar story in a lot of ways. Right. But thank you for being doing this with me. Where can you be found?
Oh, this is a lot of fun, man. Thanks for having me. You can always find me on my own YouTube show. It's on the Burnett Work on YouTube, and the show is called Robservations. You can usually find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, although my Twitter, I've turned it off just for a little while. Bring some sanity back into my life. And you can find me on Instagram at Robert Meyer Burnett.
And you can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Yeah, I do Pinterest. Also, I'm a film critic. I write for a website called disappointmentmedia.com. That's DISPOINTMEDIA.com, where I write about movies coming out in theaters. I just wrote my Artemis Fowl review. Also, I'm doing a lot of anniversary reviews, 20, 30, 25, whatever, because not a lot of movies out. Yeah, we got 3 movies out this week, but previously we haven't got a lot of movies out in theaters. So I've been doing a lot of retrospectives. Did one on Gladiator, did one on Braveheart, did one. It'll be out in July on Dick Tracy. We got so I did or somebody might have died. And so but Brian Dennehy, he died. I did a Rambo review. Irfan Khan died. I did a Slumdog Millionaire review. So those are places you can find me. Also, I do 2 shows, the Top 5 weekly every week. Well, I try to do it every week, but without movies, it's hard. This week, there's 2 episodes. So we'll be putting the other episode out pretty soon. I already put 1 episode out. And also my summer series. I did 4 episodes last year. Hoping to do between 8 and 10 this year of Bleacher Features, which is what you're watching right now. So for Robert Meyer Badent and myself, good evening, everybody.